conversation around the table, and somebody will say, so where are you from? Oh, from Indianapolis. Oh, me too. And then somebody else will say, well, I used to live in Oklahoma. Oh, yeah, I live there too. And they're like, no, this guy's crazy. What's going on? But no, I really do have two hometowns. I love working at Mercy, largely because it is faith-based organization. I love the idea that we're allowed to bring in many of the charisms, many of the values, all of those virtues, all of those things that mean that people are important. That's really what it comes down to. And so there's a very natural coalition that goes with that. The idea of people being dignified, people being important at the highest level, and we are able to and want to bring all of that into who we are and what we're doing. So that's why you're here, why we're talking about this now. What I'd like to do now is just say, how much have you heard already about Catherine McAuley? Have you had a little bit of exposure to that? Yes? Yeah? Okay. So Catherine McAuley is our founders. But Mercy really began before her. And what I mean by that is this, is that all of us are shaped by stories. All the stories you heard growing up, right? So some of you may have had the stories around the kitchen table. You grow up and you hear mom and grandma and everybody talking about this is the family, this is where we came from, or all the dirt on all the uncles and all that stuff, right? So you hear all the stories and they start to shape you. Grimm's fairy tales, right? I mean, Mother Goose, all of that stuff, right? All of those stories that you hear growing up, all of those things shape us. They basically begin to shape how we see the world, how we understand our worldview. But then it's also your experiences. Those are also stories. All the things that you have done in your life, all your education, all the places that you've been, all the things that you have experienced personally also shape how you understand who you are and who you are in the world. And both of those things come together. The stories of your experiences and the stories that you've heard come together, and they really make up who you are as a person. And the same thing is true for Catherine McAuley. She didn't just come out of a vacuum. And if you take a moment, I know you've got those wonderful little discovery maps there. If you look on your discovery map, what I'd like you to do is find the three crosses. And some of you that are brilliant at like crossword puzzles are like spotted it immediately, and then other people are still like, I don't know what that. All right, so you find the three crosses. And what that's representative of is the story from the Christian Bible, the crucifixion of Jesus on Calvary Hill. Calvary had a special significance to Catherine, and she wrote this. This institute is in a special manner founded on Calvary, there to serve a crucified Redeemer. And what she felt like when she was saying that was this idea that the story of Jesus was especially meaningful for her because it was someone who had really given up everything, sacrificed their whole self in order to make the world or lives better for somebody else. That story, that imagery, so captured and so captivated her mind, it just began to shape who she was. Jesus' willingness to give of himself on Calvary inspired her commitment to serve, influenced her faithfulness and courage to confront struggle, as well as her hope and trust in the providence of God. So for Catherine and for all of us, her hope and trust in this image of the cross is a reminder to give of ourselves to others in service. So interestingly, you'll see that the mercy cross is in fact a cross within the cross. Have you had a chance to see that yet? Did somebody point that out? Isn't that wonderful? I think that's kind of an amazing thing. If you look at your discovery maps again, one of the things I'd like you to look for is see if you can find Jesus healing the paralyzed man. Have most of you found it? You found it? Yes, good. Okay. I know they call it an interactive map, but it just seems to lay there on your desk. It doesn't really jump out, or 3D image or hologram or anything like that. The idea of Jesus here in healing the paralyzed man also has importance for us, and for Catherine especially. It's just the heart, or maybe the pathos of the story. So it's this idea that Jesus is teaching and healing and doing those things, and at some point There are these friends who understand that the most important thing that they could possibly do is get their paralyzed friend in front of Jesus. And so what do? They come to where Jesus is speaking, but they can't get to him. There's a crowd. It's very crowded in the street. It's all these houses that are compacted together, and there's just no way to get through the crowd, especially when you're carrying, four of you, carrying a mat with somebody else on it. And so what they do is they find a way to get up the side of one of the homes, which is the way that they were built in that time in the old world. And so what happened was they were able to climb up the side of one's house, and then because the houses were so close together, walk across the roofs of those homes to the house where Jesus was teaching. And then they begin to pull away the thatched roof and brought their friend down in front of Jesus. I think the idea here, and what is lifted up for Catherine, is this idea of what does it mean to love somebody that much? What does it mean to care about somebody so much that you will not tolerate any obstacle to making sure that the very best thing that could happen for them happens? It's so easy to give that up, right? I mean, and isn't it interesting, if you're familiar with the story at all in the Christian New Testament, what you'll hear is Jesus saying, because of the faith of your friends, be healed. That's the kind of imagery that Catherine was so caught up in, and this is the kind of stories that begin to shape her. So just like this story, not all of us are going to be able to provide direct physical, emotional, or spiritual healing, but like the friends that supported the process to get the paralytic to Jesus, we support our co-workers directly engaged in healing. And so we are the friends who hold the rope. We provide clean rooms. We provide warm meals. We warmly welcome everybody that comes into our clinics, hospitals, hallways. We work with data. We work with financials, where we ensure that the equipment is clean and where it needs to go is where it's at, and that it works properly. And we support patient documentation and work by resolving computer issues. All kinds of work happens in this ministry. We have that kind of a diversity in this room, I think, actually, when I was looking at the list, right? We have some EBS folks. We have some patient care associates, right? I mean, you don't have to raise your hand. You probably have to do that already, right? All this morning. But it's just the idea that what you see represented in this room is all the aspects, all the ways that we make sure that people have been able to overcome those obstacles that are barriers to them receiving the very best and needed care. And every one of you, whatever your role, have a very important place in that. You're bringing that to here. And when you bring your heart into it with it, this is, again, why we keep coming back to Catherine. Catherine didn't just have a good idea. She fell in love not with the idea, but with the people. And out of that love for the people came this idea of, I'm not going to stop until the right thing happens for them. That's the kind of thing that we want to capture. We keep trying to bring, we have to remind ourselves, guess what? You get excited, you got a new job, you're coming in, you know who you are, you have your own personal values, you love people, you care about people, that's why you're here, right? And yet, you get tired, things happen, you're going to get worn out, you're going to have struggles, you're going to have tensions within the departments or any place, because it's real life, it's where you work. Very intentionally, just like Catherine, who was a real person, lived in real life, had those real kinds of struggles, had to keep coming back to connecting herself and those people who were working with her, all those sisters that were working with her, to the idea of why are we doing what we do? And more importantly, or maybe the better word, instead of saying why, it's the who. It's looking at these folks in the eye and remembering that they are human beings, right? Human beings, souls, loved by God, loved by us. I mean, valuable. Every person in this room, you're going to want to receive the kind of care that we hope that you're giving. You're going to want to give the kind of care that you want to receive. And you want somebody to think it's just as important that your room is sterilized or that your food arrives on time and the right stuff and is warm, because that's how you demonstrate care. That's how you want to be cared for. This is what it is, to always keep bringing yourself back to not the frustrations, but the motivations, the stories that shape you, who you are, what you've experienced, what you've known. So if you look at your discovery maps again, those wonderfully flat, one-dimensional, two-dimensional interactive maps, and I want you to look and see if you can find the helicopter. Let's see if you find the helicopter on your map. Got it? All good? Everybody's found the helicopter? It doesn't make helicopter noises, it doesn't spin around, it doesn't do anything interesting, but I just wanted you to look at it for just a moment. And the idea is this: we've actually had some physicians who have said to us, and this is why it's built into this, that the helicopters, the life flights, are kind of in their mind representative of that story with the friends and the paralytic in Jesus. And it's this idea of going to the most extreme means to bring somebody to care and lowering them down or raising them up, all of those things. And so, this is the idea of how we integrate those stories from our past, those things that motivate us and influence us, into our real world and make those kinds of things a reality. So now that we understand a little bit more about why and how Mercy was formed, I'd really like to share with you a little bit more about the woman who founded the ministry, Catherine McAuley. And so we're going to share her story with you through a video. So I'm going to see if I can't find. Is it here? Thanks, Jennifer. Oh, it's right there. All right.
There you go. One more.
In 19th century Dublin, the expectations for most women were limited by their means. Some faced a life of hard labor to feed themselves and their children. Others enjoyed a life of comfort, but saw little of the world beyond their homes. A few entered religious life and dedicated their days to prayer. And then there was Catherine. Catherine McAuley had known both privilege and need, but her deepest joy was caring for those the rest of the world ignored. For her, Jesus was more than an icon. He was the inspiration of her life. As a young woman without parents or husband, she was taken in by a wealthy and generous couple who saw clearly that Catherine had a mission to feed, nurse, and educate the destitute living in the city's back alleys. So they equipped her with a carriage and the resources to do what she was driven to do. One day, Catherine witnessed a baby girl cruelly thrown out of a cellar so she would die in the street. Perhaps others would have rescued the child, but she did more. She raised the baby as her own, as she would do for many other children in the years to come. This willingness to do more than care, more than save, is a gift she passed on to each of us. We desire a lifetime relationship with those who entrust us with their care. Catherine's deep love for her adoptive parents was proven when she tenderly nursed Mrs. Callahan during a long and terminal illness. Years later, Mr. Callahan needed her physical and spiritual care. She gladly offered both, anxious that he would be at peace. Like her, we understand health care is about more than the body. It is the care of the mind and soul as well. At Mercy, healthcare is a spiritual ministry too. Confident that Catherine would spend the rest of her life serving others, Mr. Callahan bequeathed his entire fortune to her. With the resources God provided, she decided to build an impressive 3-story house. It would have room to teach up to 500 children, shelter 100 homeless servant girls each night, and be a residence for single women who desired to serve there. When it opened its doors in 1827, it was christened the House of Mercy. The house still endures, as does its purpose. With over 40 hospitals and 40,000 co-workers, Mercy extends the healing ministry of Jesus. And our desire is to keep growing. Catherine and the women working alongside her became the Sisters of Mercy. Unlike most religious orders of the time, they were not cloistered. They walked into the back alleys every day to meet the needs of women, men, and children. Because of this desire to go where they were needed, they became known as the Walking Sisters, and their ministry grew quickly. Like those sisters before us, we are still taking healthcare where it's needed most. With new and emerging technologies, we can now serve more people where they are, in their homes, schools, and where they work. This provides a new level of both care and comfort. Catherine believed the purpose of life was to more fully experience the love of God and then freely share that love with others. No matter what the need, care was to be offered with respect for the dignity of each individual. This kind of ministry was to reflect God's mercy and also share it. Catherine wrote that for those who serve others in His name, God's mercy would grow with our growth and strengthen with our strength. This is our same hope today, that we would faithfully live up to the standard Catherine set and the name we bear.
In the video, we hear that Catherine's world was very small. A lot of people in that time and in that place didn't move around a lot. You grew up in the same community, you stayed there, you lived there, you died there. But I wanted you to draw out from that the idea of what we said at the very beginning when I talked about the stories that shape us and the experiences that shape us. Now, she was heavily influenced by the stories of Christ, the stories of the gospel, and she was heavily influenced by those experiences, some of which we saw. And both of those things came together, so even though Catherine's world was very small, her worldview was not. And she saw people, all ages, all persons, as persons that were worthy of dignity. And so this becomes one of the strong trademarks of that ministry that we carry on as a legacy today. In what ways did Catherine demonstrate a willingness to do more, to care for those that the rest of the world would initially ignore?
She walked the streets to find them.
Yes, yeah.
The child, she said.
The child, the baby, yes, absolutely.
She took care of the servants who were homeless.
Yes.
She used her inheritance to build a house of mercy.
Yeah. And to all that, I mean, what's interesting is when we talk about experiences, you know, her experience of being both very poor and very wealthy, her experience of being both in homes of Catholics and Protestants, given the limitation of religion in the world that she lived in, that was pretty broad, you know. But I appreciate you say that. You know, the idea of building this home, and I don't know how much you heard prior to me coming in here, but one of the hallmarks of that story in my mind